Claims of illegal campaign overspending, of Russian interference, of data theft. Was the 2016 Brexit referendum in the UK a free and fair vote? As Britain prepares to leave the European Union next March, there's a growing chorus of voices calling for a second referendum, partly on the grounds that the first one may have been illegitimate. One of the reporters who has broken most of the stories related to Facebook, Cambridge Analytica and the possible role of Russian money in that 2016 vote is the Observer journalist Carole Cadwalladr. She joins me now from London. And from Brussels, member of the European Parliament Stephen Woolfe, a long-standing Brexit supporter and former member of UKIP, the UK Independence Party. Thank you both for joining me on Upfront. Carole, let me start with you. As a result of your own investigative journalism, you have criticised the way in which the Brexit referendum in the summer of 2016 was conducted. That's when 52% of the public voted to leave as opposed to 48% who voted to stay. Do you believe that Brexit vote was tainted?
Well, I think it's absolutely... We know that the vast majority of people voted the way that they did because of their very strong and genuine views. That is absolutely not in doubt, and I'd never question that at all. There are now multiple criminal investigations. I think the last count I did, there are actually 9 ongoing serious or criminal investigations into laws that were broken during the campaign. So that includes illegal overspending, illegal coordination of campaigns, illegal use of data. And then we've got the extraordinary revelation that the biggest sum of money spent during the referendum campaign that was supplied by Arron Banks, this Bristol businessman who supported Nigel Farage's campaign. The Electoral Commission looked at that donation for a year. They've investigated it for an entire year. And at the end of it, they said, we're not sure where that money came from. And we're not even sure that it's British.
OK. Stephen Woolfe, did you win that vote in 2016 fair and square? Carole talks about all the illegality that's now associated with your pro-Brexit campaign.
Of course, we absolutely won fair and square. I think I'm pleased that Carole actually said that people's votes were based on opinions that they'd previously formed. There is no way that I was campaigning in the streets of the north of England, in Leigh and Blackpool and the Midlands or the hometowns that I grew up in, that we were being funded by the Russians, had some sort of dark money from some organisations in the United States. But where I do have a problem with Carole's assessment is there was no connection between Vote Leave and Leave.Eu. In fact, there was the opposite. There was a complete hatred between those like Arron Banks and those who were leading the Vote Leave campaign. There was no way in heaven that these people would have been collaborating with one another.
Stephen, what about Carole's point about overspending? Both Leave.EU and Vote Leave were fined and reported to the police by the Electoral Commission. That's a fact, isn't it?
The main thrust of Carole's argument is that Nigel Farage was involved in some sort of illicit campaign with the Russians to fund a campaign to undermine British democracy. And if that is the main case about it, then that is palpably wrong, because that is never what I campaigned on, never what the millions of people that I and the people involved in UKIP met and worked with. OK,
Carole, is that palpably wrong? Is that your main case, and is that palpably wrong?
The vast majority of people, this made absolutely no difference at all to. But what is key here is that they weren't targeted by these advertisements. That is not where the money was spent. All of the money in the referendum was spent in locating a few people who are called the persuadables. And they were the people who were targeted with a fire hose of disinformation in the last 2 weeks of the campaign. And that was where the money was spent. It's the fact that it's just so essential that if you're going to have a referendum that is going to affect the foundation, the constitution of our country forever, you better do that within the law. And we know that is not the case. We know that multiple laws were broken and an investigation is ongoing into multiple other laws that might have been broken.
Stephen, what about Arron Banks, this multi-millionaire businessman who's been donating to UKIP and to pro-Brexit causes for years now? You know him. You were at the top of UKIP for a while. We've seen all these ties now coming out between Arron Banks and sources in Russia. Did you know about them when you were working alongside him?
Well, look, I never knew about his various meetings with the Russian ambassador. but he never knew about meetings that I had with a variety of people in the various campaigns. What I do know is that he did meet these people. Carole has pointed these out. But at no stage has anybody ever said that what he's done is illegal. There are investigations. And that is the point here. We can't just run a witch hunt based upon the idea of evidence that is being pulled together by people that's never been convicted.
If I may, Stephen.
Carole, you've not convicted these people. It's not been proved in a court of law.
There are 3 investigations now that the Electoral Commission carried out and that it has concluded and that is now passed to the Metropolitan Police. So that is overspending by Leave.Eu, overspending by Vote Leave and overspending by Believe. Yeah. And the Electoral Commission has now concluded those investigations to a criminal level of proof and it's passed those over to the Metropolitan Police. So we can say definitively that yes, actually, those laws were broken and that has been proved.
Stephen?
No, Carole. Come on, let's be fair about this. This is not beyond a criminal level of proof because the Electoral Commission doesn't have a criminal level of proof. If it did, it wouldn't pass it on to the Metropolitan Police in the first place. What they're saying is they have evidence that they believe doesn't fit their particular view, which is
they've ruled. They are the government regulator.
The process
and they
is
have
different.
Ruled
it's not saying that
the law was broken. They are the official regulator appointed by the government.
Yes, the rules are broken.
That is what their ruling says.
But
no,
Carole,
it's not rules, it's laws. Laws were broken. Laws were broken.
There is a difference.
That is what the Electoral Commission has said.
Hold on, Stephen, make your point.
Carole, I appreciate that you've interrupted me about 16 times there. In the UK, we have very different levels. There is a civil liability law and there are criminal laws. And in the civil liability law, that is where the Electoral Commission is. They have no criminal powers and no criminal designation of what it is. That's why they've passed it on to Metropolitan Police, because they don't have the powers.
Did UKIP get money from Russian sources, given you got so much money from Arron Banks when you were part of UKIP?
Absolutely not.
How
Nigel said it. Because we wouldn't have been struggling for most of the money that we had in the first place.
Okay, Carole, let me ask you this.
This is where the nonsense comes from, Mehdi.
Okay, well, let's try and get to the bottom of the nonsense. Let's try and get to the bottom of the alleged nonsense. Carole, you've written an article for the New York Review of Books saying Britain needs its own Russia investigation, its own Robert Mueller. But given how controversial and divisive the Mueller investigation has been here in the United States, do you think that'd actually be of any value in the UK?
Well, I think I look at this the speech the head of MI6 made. It's only his second ever speech since he's been in office. And he pointed to the fact that how MI6 had been involved in the mass expulsion of Russian spies from Britain. And that happened after Sergei Skripal was poisoned. The Foreign Office took this action. Now, one of those people who was expelled from Britain at that time, which MI6 confirmed was a Russian intelligence officer, this is the person who was targeting Arron Banks. And he wasn't just targeting Arron Banks at any old time, he was targeting him in the months before the referendum. And Arron Banks was invited by the Russian ambassador to meet a Russian businessman who offered him these kind of like fantastic gold and diamond deals.
Okay.
And I don't think we can, it's not a question that Russia just like writes a check to a political campaign and that's how it works. What we know from patterns all across Europe is it's about enriching businessmen who then donate to campaigns. It's about offering sweetheart deals. And when we look at when we look at what was proposed to Arron Banks, that just looks like a sweetheart deal. It does.
Stephen, let me ask you this. Given you want to get to the bottom of this like Carole does, would you support a Mueller-style investigation, an independent investigation?
I sound like a Liberal Democrat. The answer is yes, and the answer is no. On the answer is yes, because I think it would be farcically show that there was no involvement between UKIP and the Russians or Leave.Eu and the Russians, and more importantly, a connection between Vote Leave and Leave.eu. But on the other side of it, it would actually continue the negativity and the divisiveness and the dangerous damage to our political feeling that's happening in the United Kingdom at the moment. And whereas I believe that Carole has a complete duty as a reporter to pursue people like Cambridge Analytica and the case that she's looking at now, but there is a duty on all of us to look at this carefully and responsibly about how we're damaging our democracy when you link things that are not factual with things that are just kind of ideas.
You mentioned damaging democracy. As time goes by, Stephen, as more and more evidence of seeming wrongdoing emerges, more and more questions go unanswered, there does seem to be a momentum growing for a second referendum on Brexit. Sky News did a poll last month that found more than half of Britain support a second referendum. You're a Democrat. What's wrong with having another vote, given all the controversy, given it's nearly 3 years later?
Purely and simply because democracy demands that once you have a vote, you have to enact the decisions of the people. And this view here is different. What's being asked is not to enact leaving the European Union, it's to change your mind before it actually happens. And if you do so, there will be millions of people who still would vote to leave. And I don't want to see that division between families, between rich and poor, between those so-called who don't know what they're talking about and those who believe that they do, continue by trying to usurp that.
Carole, final question to you. You've said that British politics now is, quote, conducted in darkness. In Britain, it's no longer possible to keep money out of politics or even to track it. So given that, a second referendum would probably be, in your view, as compromised and tainted as the first one, wouldn't it? How would you get around that problem, given your own reporting?
Well, I'm not here to campaign for a second referendum. I'm just here to tell you that that was not a free and fair vote. It was not conducted democratically. We can have absolutely no assurance in the outcome of it. And the rest is for politicians to deal with. But yeah, the role of the tech companies, of Facebook and of Google, right at the heart of this, their utter refusal to answer questions to our lawmakers, that is a massive ongoing problem that makes holding a free and fair election in years to come just filled with enormous uncertainty, and that's why it's so important what Parliament is trying to do in trying to hold them to account.
On that note, we'll have to leave it there. Carole, Stephen, thanks for joining me on The Arena. That's our show. UpFront will be back next week.